So you've got your reference. It's Peter Capaldi from Doctor Who. I believe this is the Kill the Moon episode that we're dealing with here. Uh, this particular Who has wonderful facial characteristics, so he's a great guy to draw from. And in particular, this drawing that you're wanting to work with, um, he has great shadows on his face, which can really be an asset to you for trying to get the form that you're trying to draw here in your drawing. So a couple of things to keep in mind before you begin laying down your initial drawing is let's think a little bit about his facial features and some proportions, so that as you begin to lay down your general light drawing, you can begin to try to pay as close attention as you can to the relationship of every element of the face. For instance, just looking here right off the bat, you can see that the symmetry of a face, and particularly Capaldi's very narrow face that he has here, you can see that the dead center from the top of his scalp, not the top of his hair, and down to where approximately his chin is, the dead center of his face is falling about right here. So it's good to remember that as far as the space between the top of the chin and here, and where the eyes and nose and mouth are going to fall. Well, this lower triangle you see here creates a really wonderful area where the nose comes in, and then the mouth at approximately the halfway point is. So when you're looking at that kind of thing, remember also that the mouth and the chin share this distance apart from each other, and then the nose and the mouth share a similar distance from the tip of his nose here down to the center of his mouth to the tip of his chin. You'll see that that's about a halfway point there. So in getting the length of the face, you'll find how to establish that as you're looking at it. The same thing goes, and you take that same proportion outward and you go up to here, you'll see that about the same distance goes about up to the furrow of his brow right there. So you can begin to establish this area. And so you can see here how everything's breaking down, and then approximately the same distance there again, and then to the top of his head. You can see that everything in his face here is probably broken down to 5 equal sections. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 all the way to the top of his hair. So you can begin to think that way about looking at the face even before you begin to draw it, so that you can begin to lay lightly out the things that matter to you. So that being the case, let me change pencils here. Another thing to think about when you're looking at this, besides those proportions, is this photograph has wonderful hard lighting on it. So it's got these great shadows that help you build form. So rather than just thinking in terms of outlines, like I mentioned, try thinking also in terms of depth of shape and shadow. Again, we're really lucky that we have let me turn that off and just go here. We're really lucky we have this great light here. Here, I'll use a black there. We have this great light here on his nose, and here, and then down here along the mouth line, and then you got the hard highlights up here, and then down along his chin in this area like this, and here, and then here. You got all these wonderful hard light elements that you can have that stand out really well. And likewise, you've got areas that fall heavier into the shadows in here like this. And so when you begin to look at the element that way, you begin to break him down not just in outlines and lines, but in terms of shade. So from this point forward, I'm just going to let it go fast forward and just kind of get the drawing in. The drawing took quite a while, so we're just going to speed things up here. As you can see what's happening here, I'm still just blocking everything in, keeping in mind the proportions. I've made the mouth a little too low here, so in a second here I'm going to correct it. There we go. I realized I drew it a little too low based on our proportions we were talking about. And now I'm going through. I'm thinking, as I mentioned, as much in terms of the shadows and highlights as I am in terms of contour here. And it just keeps going. And this will go for quite a while, so I don't want to continue to drone on talking here, but you can get the idea. And here we go. As we go further down the line here, I'm going to drop a gray background into this so that I can put some highlights in. Also, I could never decide whether I had the nose right or not, so I really mess with the nose a whole lot here. Looking back at it, I think I had the nose fine enough at the beginning, but I continue to mess with it. But you can see here I'm putting a whole lot more shade and correcting the ear height there. Once I realized, I looked back over at my original drawing and realized I had a big difference in space between his collar of the spacesuit and where his earlobe was and his jaw. So those corrections have been made, and now I'm going back in to continue more shade. And at this point, I think I've got the proportions where I want them. And it's going to be more messing with the nose. I just could not leave the nose alone here. I think I finally got it where I want it. But it's like the fourth time I've come around to mess with that. And it goes on through. And I've decided to put in the darker background now in order for me to be able to come in and put the highlights. And at this point, I've kind of left the photographs behind, and I'm mostly just going through to get the dimensions I need. So there we have the finished drawing. I hope that helped.